Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
My name is Daniel Patrick Reynolds, and am 42 years old. I stand 5'11" tall, weigh 190 pounds, and have light brown hair, blue eyes, and admittedly a slight midriff bulge. I work as the manager of CAD services for JMC Manufacturing in Hamilton, Georgia. Right now, I find myself aboard a massive cruise ship surrounded by nearly 8,000 people. Yet I feel utterly alone. The how and why of my solitude is a heartbreaking story. Just 4 weeks ago, I was happily married to Rachel Reynolds, the most wonderful woman in the world. But in the blink of an eye, my world came crashing down. Rachel, my beautiful wife, passed away from cancer. A cruel and sudden diagnosis that left no time for hope. It began with her routine annual checkup, a visit that revealed the unimaginable. Multiple cancers, breast, colon, and ovarian, had silently ravaged her body. By the time the results came back, it was too late. 5 weeks after that appointment, she was gone, leaving me and our 3 children devastated. Rachel had been planning this cruise for almost a year and a half. It was meant to be a celebration of our 21st wedding anniversary. After her passing, our kids banded together and insisted I go through with the trip. They believed it was what she would have wanted. And so here I am, on the eve of what would have been our 21st anniversary, lost in a sea of people but feeling the weight of her absence more profoundly than ever. We met when I attended Matt's high school graduation. Matt Benson and I grew up together as next-door neighbors. He was my best friend. Matt's family moved into the house next to ours when he was 5 and I was a worldly 7. I had just finished first grade, and Matt would be starting kindergarten in the fall. Matt and I became more like brothers as we grew up. Since I was bigger than he was, I became his protector. Matt was a lot smarter than I was, and during high school he helped me with some of my homework. Matt, it turned out, was a genius, but for some unknown reason, he never flaunted his intelligence. Even though he was a genius, he wanted the same things all of us wanted: love and respect. To achieve that, Matt went through school just like the rest of our friends. We had many great times double dating in school. Then I graduated, which left Matt alone for his final 2 years in school. But with all the friends we had made, although I was gone, he still felt protected. I guess I should explain a couple of things about Matt. Matt was a proportional dwarf, a little person. When he turned 6, he just stopped growing. He was 42 tall and weighed 58 pounds, but his heart and brain were bigger than most people twice his size, not physically but in a good way. He had an endearing quality that just about made you love him. Sure, there were some bullies in school who wanted to pick on him, but I made it known that I would not tolerate anyone picking on my brother. I was bigger and meaner than most of the others in school as I got my last growth spurt in 8th grade. Well, except for the last 6 years when my midsection took on a life of its own and decided that it wanted to become bigger. At the graduation ceremony, it was easy to see where Matt was sitting. All I had to do was look for the possible absence of someone in a seat. We sat behind the graduates. My parents were on one side of me. Sitting next to them was Rebecca, Matt's 17-year-old normal-sized sister. Next to her were Matt's parents, Claire and David. My parents were Richard and Anna Reynolds. I soon learned that sitting on Matt's right was a beautiful girl, Rachel Foster. On his left was Brian Maxwell. When they stood up to receive their diplomas, it looked funny. First, you saw Rachel, who looked around 59, followed by Matt at maybe 42, and then Brian at 63. When I graduated from high school, Brian took over as Matt's protector and friend. For all the smarts Matt had, he didn't try to become the very best. But as the 4th highest student in school, he achieved what he was after: great grades, enough for a scholarship, yet he didn't have to give any speeches. Why was this so important? Because he was never one to speak in public. He was too self-conscious of his height. But in other ways, he was the biggest person I knew. His compassion and understanding were greater than anyone I could even think of. After the ceremony, we got the chance to meet as many friends as we could. But the one I noticed the most was Rachel Foster. With their last names so close, she found herself assigned seating near Matt all through high school. I never really paid attention to her before, since my classes and Matt's were never the same. But today I did. Once I actually met her face to face, I felt instantly smitten. Rachel had strawberry blonde hair, blue-green eyes, and was a walking dream. We spoke about how Matt and I were more like brothers and not just neighbors. Rachel said that she had heard nothing but praise and love from Matt whenever he mentioned my name. Since graduation, I had been away to the University of Georgia in Athens. I was working toward a degree in mechanical engineering with a minor in CAD. Rachel and I hit it off very well from our first introduction. As we talked, I found out that Matt and Rachel were both going to UGA in the fall. I felt delighted, to say the least. My best friend and the woman I was in love with would now be joining me at college. At UGA, I became Matt's protector again and Rachel's boyfriend. By the time I graduated, Rachel and I had announced our engagement. We would marry during the summer. Rachel always wanted a July wedding, so we enjoyed a great wedding with Matt at my side. Next to him were my other two groomsmen. Brian was first, followed by my friend Jacob Adams from school. Rachel had her best friend, Sarah Holloway, as maid of honor, while Taylor Mendez and Olivia Sharp were her bridesmaids. Rachel's parents were Beth and Henry Foster. They were not very thrilled with us getting married so soon. They wanted us to wait until Rachel graduated. We agreed, but as things happen quite often, fate decided to take a different path. Somehow, Rachel turned up pregnant. We both were using protection to make sure there were no slip-ups, but one night I had run out of condoms, and since Rachel was on the pill, I thought we were safe. Yeah, right. And I have some oceanfront property in Iowa I can sell you, too. That pleasant accident was Emma. Since we found out about her being pregnant around the end of November, we figured that the birth would be around August 1st. We were right, as August 3rd was Emma's birthday. Rachel's mother doted on young Emma, and the following fall, Rachel went back to school. Shortly after I graduated from UGA, I found a CAD job at JMC Manufacturing. JMC wanted people to start at the bottom and work their way up. This way, each person learned what and how the company provided its products and services. 2 years later, Nathan was born, shortly after Rachel graduated with a degree in human resources. With her degree in hand, Rachel applied for a job at JMC. They accepted her, and she started at JMC. After 6 years, she became the assistant manager of JMC. This was even after the birth of my little angel, Lillian. I was no slouch in the advancement department. I had moved up to CAD services supervisor. Our life was idyllic. We were so in love with each other and our precious children. Then came the fateful day when Rachel called me to come pick her up at her doctor's office. Her blood test came back that day. It was May 5th, the day my world ended. We drove home in silence, neither wishing to express our grief and sorrow. 3 days later, we told our children. Emma, at 20, was in her junior year at UGA and the leader of our trio. Nathan, at 18, was just finishing high school. Then there was Lillian, at 15, going on 30. I'm sure that anyone who has teenagers knows what I mean. Of the three, Nathan was most upset. He had always been his mother's favorite, just as Lillian was mine. I'm not saying that we had spoiled them or anything, as we loved each of our children the same. Emma took control and made us all a meal. Although most of us just picked at the food on our plates, it was not a normal, happy evening at the Reynolds household that night. They scheduled more tests and then the biopsies. Finally, we knew the truth. Rachel was going to die, and it would be very soon. How she coped with the impending doom of dying, I'll never know. I just knew that each day, she woke with a smile on her face and love in her heart. I had to keep working to cope with the anger against God and the world that had caused this tragedy to strike our family. Each night, I pleaded with God to take me and leave Rachel alone. It reminded me of the song Don't Take the Girl, sung by Tim McGraw. I would give everything I had, even my own life, if I could save my love. To no avail. I couldn't change fate. I had to keep going on for our children's sake. Not mine. Matt and his wife, Laura, were right there, trying to help as much as they could. They were a godsend to my family. The day that Rachel slipped away from me, Matt took me in his short but strong arms. He held me as I cried rivers of tears for the loss of my one true love. Matt had Laura find a bottle of my medicine from the cupboard. We sat in my den and drank until I fell asleep. Well, in fact, I consumed most of the liquor and Matt talked the most. I listened some and maybe thought some, But that was only until my mind imploded and I went off to the land of Nod due to a drunken stupor. For the next week, I ran on autopilot. I was there physically, but I walked around in a mental haze. Matt made all the funeral arrangements. Brian got the church lined up, and Laura took care of the kids. Without all of my close friends, I don't know how I could have coped with the loss of Rachel. Before we knew of her problems, Rachel and I had planned to take a cruise around the Western Caribbean. Our plan was to visit Bahamas, Cozumel, and Belize. Then we would head back to Jacksonville, Florida. The date for the trip was only 4 weeks after Rachel passed away. Matt, Laura, and my children finally convinced me to go on this cruise. They all said I needed the time alone to grieve and come back to the land of the living. They said I'd come back refreshed and ready to tackle the rest of my life. That life, though, would be without my beloved Rachel. I just knew they were wrong. But I went anyway. The cruise line would reimburse me for Rachel's cost. But to me, I really didn't care. So, on the Saturday morning before the cruise was supposed to leave, I drove to Jacksonville. I had made a reservation to stay at a local motel. The following morning, I left my SUV at the motel and took a cab to the docks. I unloaded my single suitcase on wheels and headed to the terminal so I could check in. I felt and looked more like a zombie as I waited in the check-in lines. Once on the ship, I went to the bar, where I immediately started to drink. My plan was to drink the entire damn cruise. I really didn't care about anything else. When the bartender came over, I asked for my normal Jameson whiskey and was extremely surprised that they had it. Before I left for the trip, I made a pact with myself. I would try very hard to make the best of this trip. It was very important for me to make sure that I had my act together for my children's sake, if for no other reason. Emma, I felt, would be fine, but my 2 other children, Nathan and Lillian, would need me alive and well so I could be there for them. I'd need all my wits about me to cope with Lillian and her growing independence. I had to straighten out my emotions and learn to go on with my life. At first, I thought about jumping overboard to join my lovely Rachel, but I immediately had second thoughts about that idea. I thought that if I selected the second option, 2 things could happen. First, I might join her, but I would leave our children alone, and they would feel like I do now. Second, I would end up in hell, but it would make no difference because I'd be without our precious children and my beloved Rachel. That first night, as I was lying in my bed, I felt the swaying of the ship in the waves gently rocking me to sleep. Suddenly, I heard a noise. I heard a tapping on the window. It turned out that one of the 2 chairs on the balcony was too close to the window. But to me, I thought that the gentle rocking of the ship was tapping out a message to me from my beloved Rachel. I took the message to mean that she understood my deep sorrow and grief. I also felt, though, that the message was telling me more. It was telling me that I had real responsibilities at home. I had to accept those responsibilities, or our children would become devastated. During the 2 days at sea while we headed for Bahamas, I moped around the ship. They served food in an area called the Market Cafe on the Apollo deck. I made sure that I ate my breakfast alone and then skipped lunch. Supper time was a lonely affair. They assigned me to a table for 2 in the nearest restaurant. As I sat there, I ordered Jameson on the rocks. I drank that with my supper. After supper, I went to the casino and, of course, the bar. While I was there, I tried to drown my sorrows in booze. I kept on thinking about what I had to do next. What was the secret? How could I survive the devastating tragedy that had occurred in my life? Wait, that happened in our lives. Me and my children. It was now us against the cruel world out there that took our Rachel from us. I'd have to start thinking about us now, not just me. What could we do to cope? What could we do to survive? I had to stop thinking about me and start thinking about us. The second day and night passed much like the first. I finally managed to fall asleep near dawn. I slept until a knock on the door announced the cabin steward. Omar was his name and he was from Indonesia. He was very friendly and asked about Miss Rachel. I broke down and cried and explained that I had lost her to cancer. He sympathized with me and promised not to mention her name again. Omar helped as much as he could. He told me where to eat, where to go for privacy, and what facilities were available to me on the ship. He told me about their medical center, where I might ask for some sleeping pills to help me sleep. They also had a priest on board who was available to talk with me. Omar said that being busy would help me to cope with my loss. He was so far away from his family that it was as if he had lost his family too. Working as much as he does, he found it hard to write or even talk to his family. I realized that I might not be in such a bad situation after all. On Wednesday morning, I made a big decision. Today was the first day of the rest of my life. The most important thing was, I had to come out of my induced stupor. I had to carry on because of my children. I found that most of the people had deserted the ship by 9 a.m. Many of them were off exploring Nassau. I kept hearing that everyone wanted to go visit Paradise Island and Atlantis Resort. I wanted no part of leaving the ship, as I just might not come back. After I ate a leisurely breakfast, I headed down to the lobby. I wanted to visit guest services. I wanted to see about getting some presents for the various people back home. That included Matt and Laura, Brian and his wife Lindsay, as well as my children. My new mind was telling me that I needed some souvenirs for my cruise. To do that, I thought that I might go ashore the following day at Grand Cayman and buy something. But before I could do that, I wanted to make sure that I could. I learned that Rachel had made reservations at each port. We were to enjoy an excursion at each stop. Since I was unaware of these plans, this presented a huge predicament. Her plan called for us to go snorkeling from 7 Mile Beach in Grand Cayman, then see the Mayan ruins of Tulum when we docked at Cozumel. I had missed the rainforest adventure in Belize. That was where you first rode a chairlift inside the jungle canopy, then there was a bobsled-type coaster, and finally a zipline trip over the rainforest. Of them all, I think the one I missed sounded like the best of the lot. I rather wanted to see the ruins, but I surely didn't want to do them alone. What was I to do now? I went to the lobby bar and sat down. About an hour later, I noticed a woman 3 stools over to my right. She was a little younger than I was. She was holding a glass like mine, getting a refill. When I looked closer, I saw the bottle label. It was Jameson, the same whiskey that I drank. I got up and walked over to sit beside her. I asked where she had heard of the whiskey. She answered, "My husband said it was the very best whiskey he had ever tasted. I thought I would try it to see if I can drink his memory away, so I can move on with my life without him." "Why do you ask?" My response was immediate. "I call it my medicine, which I use to relieve extreme stress and bad times. When I came on this cruise, I never expected to find it here of all places. From what you said, I take it that you lost your husband recently." "Yes, 16 years is not the proper definition of 'till death do us part.' I thought about 50 to 60 years would be the answer to that vow. He was in an accident coming home from work. That was a month ago. I almost canceled this cruise because of his passing. Our parents had different ideas. They insisted I take this time to grieve and then come home ready to move on with our lives again." "What are you drowning out?" I could see the tears start as she said the word "R." 21 years and 3 days ago, I too lost the love of my life. My Rachel died of cancer 3 weeks ago. She had planned this whole trip as a second honeymoon for us, as we never made a first one due to school, children, and finances. We planned this as our time to rekindle the passion and fun of being together. "Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Michael. Michael Reynolds. And you are?" She took a deep breath, wiped a tear, and said, "You are not going to believe me, but my name is Claire Reynolds. My maiden name was Harper. 17 years ago tomorrow, I married the love of my life in Omaha, Nebraska. His name was Lucas Reynolds. We, too, planned to celebrate our anniversary here on the ship. I'm so sorry for your loss. I can understand your grief and sorrow. We talked and drank for about another hour. We finally stopped when we both suddenly felt hungry. I blurted out that we should find some food. Drinking all this whiskey on empty stomachs wouldn't do us much good, especially this early in the day. We went up to the Apollo deck to find something to eat. It was 5 decks above where we were in the lobby. After finding food, we sat and talked. When we finished eating, we wandered around the ship and just talked some more. We found that we had a lot in common. It turned out that we liked the same foods, the same music, and we shared very closely aligned views on life. I couldn't believe the similarities of our lives. yet we had lived at least 900 miles apart. Claire and Lucas had waited to have children. They wanted their careers established before they had their 2 children, Emma, aged 9, and Lucas Jr., aged 13. They lived in a nice home in Omaha. Claire worked at Vanguard Pharmaceuticals as a chemist. I told Claire about my children, and although they were older, they still needed a woman in their life. When I said that, I had to backtrack a second. I didn't mean I was looking for a mother for them. It's just that with Rachel dying so quickly, I don't think we've had time to properly grieve. Ryan is the one I really worry about. He was his mother's favorite, if such a thing is possible when you love all your children the same. But then, too, my angel, Sophie, is going to need the influence of a strong woman to keep her in check. I know she is my girl, but she is at the age where she really doesn't want to listen to her dad. I'm sure that your Lucas will be approaching that age soon, too. Claire nodded and smiled warmly. Michael, there is no need to feel embarrassed. I understood your meaning very well. Yes, it's true that Lucas will soon be at that stage when listening to me will be an exercise in futility. But after hearing what you have said, I think that you'll be able to make it through this just fine. I think that Layla will be a big help as a big sister. She will also be an ally for you with Sophie. As for Ryan, your example will help him a lot as well. Things were going so well when suddenly I noticed the time. It was almost midnight. Cruise ships operate 24/7, so you could see a little activity all the time, but there weren't as many people out as during the daylight and evening hours. Claire, as lovely as it has been, I think we need some sleep. I have a snorkeling excursion scheduled for tomorrow. If you like, you could go with me, my treat. Please don't take this the wrong way. What I mean is that it's already booked and paid for, and I don't think I'd want to do it alone. I might have gone to the ruins in Cozumel, but again, not alone. I'm not trying to be pushy, but I thought I'd ask. Claire looked at me for a moment before answering. Oh, you sweet man. Yes, if you don't mind, I would love to go with you tomorrow, and to the ruins, too. When my husband and I booked this cruise, we hadn't made any plans for excursions. All we wanted was just to spend time together on the ship. Yes, we could also take some time to go ashore so we can buy a couple of things for the kids. We could still do that too, I guess. Yes, we could. Claire, thank you. I think we dock at 7 a.m. We can go ashore around 7:30 or 8 in the morning for the excursion. I'll have to check the information in my room. I'm staying in stateroom 541. Where are you staying? Claire suddenly smiled. Oh my goodness. I'm in 543, right next door. Just knock on my door when you're ready. Do you want to eat breakfast before we go? That would probably be a good idea, Claire. Let's say breakfast at 7. That's great, Michael. I'll place a call for a wake-up call for about 6:30. This way I know that I'll be ready. Remember to wear your suit. I chuckled. That would be the one thing I would have forgotten. I'm still a little forgetful since all this happened. I totally understand that, Michael. I'll see you in the morning, or later this morning, anyway, Claire said as she opened her door. As we talked, we started to walk back to our staterooms. Before we knew it, we were there. Good night, Claire. I hope you sleep better tonight. You too, Michael. Who would have thought that 2 people in much the same situation would meet, be that close, and for 3 days never even know about it? Well, bedtime. Oh yeah, wake-up call. I was up even earlier than the wake-up call. I showered and dressed in my swimsuit, then put on my shorts, a polo shirt, and deck shoes. Rachel had bought them especially for this trip, and I had yet to wear them. I couldn't see wasting money, so I decided, why not use them? At 7 sharp, I knocked on the door to 543. I hoped that I wasn't pushing too hard about wanting Claire to come along. When the door opened, there stood this gorgeous woman. She stood around 5 feet 7 inches, curved in all the right places, and looking all of 25 years old. Excuse me, but is this Claire Reynolds' room? Claire smiled, rolling her eyes. Of course, Michael, it's me. With the sun behind you shining just right on your hair, I would have sworn that you were in your early 20s. For a second, I thought I maybe had the wrong room. Claire laughed, shaking her head. Oh, you silver-tongued devil, you. You could charm the birds right out of the trees if you aren't careful. Now, are we going to breakfast or what? I stood there for a second, stuttered and stammered a little more. Then we walked down the hallway toward the elevators. Once again, we needed to go to the Apollo deck. I felt like a teenager again, courting a new girl. It was probably the most fun I had had in a long while. And to think, yesterday at this time we were strangers, both suffering through a recent loss. Today we were both looking forward to a day of fun in the sun. Isn't it weird that when you least expect it, something, or someone, comes along and turns your whole world upside down? The next 4 days passed by so quickly that at times it felt like each day lasted only an hour or two. We swam in the ocean, the pools on the ship, and even tried the water slide in the kids' area until we got told to leave. Sometimes we just lay beside each other by the pool and talked, and sometimes we didn't even talk at all, we just lay there enjoying each other's presence. By Saturday, the last full day on the ship, we were holding hands as we lay on the rear deck of the ship, talking. "Claire, what are your plans on Sunday? Do you have to rush home immediately?" She turned her head toward me, shading her eyes from the sun. "I have a reservation for a flight out of Miami. My schedule says it will leave at 4 something on Sunday." "Why?" I hesitated for a moment. "Well, I thought you might like to come meet my children. You could fly out of Austin on Monday and save yourself some money." Claire's expression softened. "Michael, this is a little sudden, isn't it? I mean, we only met 4 days ago." "Yes, I know we spent most of those 4 days in each other's company, but I'm not sure just what my feelings are for you yet. I don't want to lead you on and then drop you when I find that we aren't compatible or that we don't love each other." She exhaled slowly, as if weighing her next words carefully. "What I suggest is that for now we take it slow and see where this leads us. We can call each other and there's email and video chats. There are so many ways to keep in touch. For now, I think we need to go slow." I nodded, trying to suppress the disappointment I felt. "Claire, of course, I know that you're right. It's just that, I guess now things feel too soon and too raw. Here I find another woman who reminds me so much of Rachel. Some of the things you say and do remind me of her. I'm so sorry, Claire. I ruined our great time together, didn't I? I'll leave you alone now." She reached over and grabbed my hand before I could get up. "No, Michael, please stay. We can talk about this some more, but we need to see where we are once we return home. This has been one of the best times in my life. But you are not Lucas, and I am not your Rachel either." She squeezed my hand gently. "I think that we are moving too fast because of this environment. We found ourselves pushed together for a long time, but with our emotional states in such turmoil, it's possible that we aren't thinking clearly yet." I sighed. "Yeah, I can see that now, Claire. I'm sorry. I was just hoping that maybe my life had turned a corner. Suddenly, I saw a possible bright future ahead of me, but it was just a dream after all." She chuckled softly. "Not so fast, Buster. There might be a bright future ahead for both of us. But now we each have to make sure that our heads are on straight. It's important that we accept that we're alone now, except for our children. We'll talk and move at a pace that we can control." She hesitated. "Michael, I, too, can see the potential for a bright future with you and your children. But we have to go slow, if not for our sake, then for our children's sake." I smiled. "I see that now, Claire. I can just see Layla giving me an earful for moving so fast. She has an awful lot of her mother in her. I think I might lose Ryan if I rush into something, too. He's more sensitive than the rest. And Sophie, well, that might be the breaking point for her. She would probably really rebel against my authority then." I exhaled and nodded. "Yes, Claire, you're thinking much more clearly than I am about this entire situation. I guess my heart overloaded my brain, or maybe something else took over my mind for a while. Maybe grief had too strong a hold on me. Please forgive me for my rashness." Claire smiled warmly. "Michael, I think instead of grief it was loneliness. Our time together has been wonderful, but we have to return to our real lives. We need to learn to cope with that first, and then maybe we can think about us later on." She looked up at the sky, as if searching for answers in the clouds. "I know that I, too, had dreams of a better future with you. But this is a dream world, not real life. For now, we need to reacquaint ourselves with our loved ones. Then, and only then, can we see what tomorrow brings." I chuckled lightly. I knew all Rachels were smart. And now I've met yet another one. She grinned. "I hope to know this one better and become closer friends as time goes by." She reached up and kissed me gently on the lips. As I stood there, stunned, she slipped away. That was the last time I saw Claire, except for when I saw her in a long line of people going through customs. By the time I got outside, she was gone. Once again, I was alone. I shared a cab ride to my hotel with a newlywed couple. When I loaded up the next morning, I headed home. It was a long and dreary ride back to Cedar Park. It's funny how you can have people all around you but still feel lonely. As I drove towards my house, that lonely feeling crept back in. Once home, my children surrounded me, but I still felt alone. My first and most important reason for living was gone. My bed was empty, much like my heart. Not only did I feel numb, but I felt as though I'd lost an important part of myself. I rather felt that I wasn't running on all cylinders. In fact, it felt as if I was barely running on 3 or maybe 4 at the most. I went back to work, but my heart wasn't in it. I rather existed until my manager called me into his office. Jonathan Myers was a good guy. Vanguard Engineering, where I worked, was kind of like a huge family. We all looked out for each other. Jonathan called me in and we talked about Rachel and my loss. He also told me that if I needed more time, he'd be happy to let me go on extended family leave. Instead, I told him that I'd be fine. It'll just take a little more time, I promised. I swore to try harder to return to my old work rhythm. After that meeting, I promised myself that I'd give back to the company what they deserved. I had to get back to me running on all cylinders, so I threw myself back into work. Very soon, I started feeling better again. Not overnight, but within a couple of weeks, I felt almost back to my old self. Almost. Every night, I still found that I cried myself to sleep. That was my new normal. Over the next couple of months, I fell into a routine. Work, home, kids, repeat. There were still nights when I couldn't sleep, nights when the weight of my grief crushed me. Some nights, I'd wake up feeling tangled in the sheets, gasping for air as though my body was rebelling against reality. But the difference was, the bad nights weren't every night anymore. I was starting to move forward. One step at a time. It was a Saturday evening, and I was in the kitchen, attempting to fix dinner for the kids. Nothing fancy, just some pasta and a homemade sauce I was trying out. The house was quiet. Layla was at work, Ryan was out with Jason, and Sophie was in her room, probably texting or watching TikToks. Then the phone rang. "Angel, can you get that?" I called out, stirring the sauce. A few seconds later, I heard a thump, the unmistakable sound of a phone hitting the floor. I turned off the stove and rushed into the living room, expecting to find Sophie's usual clumsy self. Instead, she was slumped in my recliner, pale as a ghost, staring at the phone in shock. I frowned. "Soph?" She blinked rapidly, then pointed at the phone, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, it's Clara Carter." My heart stopped. I hurried over, picked up the receiver, and hesitantly said, "Hello? Michael, hi. It's been a while." It was her voice. After all these months, I hadn't expected to hear it again. And yet, here she was. Hearing Clara's voice felt like being hit by a wave of nostalgia. We talked for a while about how we'd been doing, about our kids, about life since the cruise. She told me she had been meaning to call sooner but kept hesitating. I admitted that I had thought about calling her too, but didn't know if she wanted to hear from me. Then she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Michael, do you think we could start talking again? Maybe emails or Skype? I mean, if you want to." There was a nervous edge to her voice, as if she wasn't sure how I'd respond. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because part of me was terrified of opening that door again. After a few moments, I found myself smiling. "Yeah, Clara, I'd really like that." That first call was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Clara and I started talking regularly again. First over email, then video calls. It wasn't like before. There was no rushing into something too soon. Instead, we were just two friends catching up. And yet, there was something different this time. Less pressure, less grief, less weight from the past. And maybe, just maybe, a chance for something new. One night, after a long conversation about our kids, Clara hesitated before speaking. "Michael, what if we met up again?" I blinked. "Like in person?" She laughed. Yes, in person. What do you think? My mind raced. Would this be a mistake? Or was it exactly what we needed to figure out where we stood? I took a deep breath. Yeah. Let's do it. We planned to meet in Kansas City for a short vacation. It was neutral ground, somewhere neither of us had deep memories attached to. Layla thought it was a great idea. Ryan was skeptical but shrugged it off. Sophie? She just smirked. So, is this like a date? She asked with a grin. I groaned. It's a meeting, sophomore, sure, Dad. A meeting. I let it go. But deep down, I wondered, would this trip be a second chance? Or just closure? When I saw Clara at the airport, my breath caught. She looked different, not physically but emotionally. Lighter, less weighed down by grief. And when she saw me, she smiled. Hey, stranger. And just like that, everything changed. Clara and I had planned a simple weekend, nothing extravagant, just two people reconnecting. We checked into separate hotel rooms at her insistence, met for dinner at a quiet little steakhouse, and spent the next couple of days exploring the city together. Felt easy. There were no expectations, no pressure, just two people figuring things out. And for the first time in a long time, I felt happy. On the last night of our trip, we sat on a rooftop terrace, watching the city lights. Clara leaned on the railing, her eyes fixed on the skyline. Michael, can I ask you something? I took a sip of my drink. Of course. She turned to me. What are we doing? I hesitated. I don't know. What do you think we're doing? She sighed. I like being with you. I think I don't feel so alone when we talk. But I also think, I'm scared. That made two of us. I put my drink down and faced her. Clara, I don't have all the answers. But I know one thing. I like being with you too. And maybe that's enough for now. She smiled softly. Yeah. Maybe it is. And just like that, we decided to take a chance. Not to rush. Not to force anything. But to see where this could go. Over the next few months, Clara and I talked every day. Some nights, we'd video chat for hours, laughing about everything and nothing. Other times, we'd just sit in silence, comforting each other in ways only people who've lost can understand. She met my kids over video calls. I met hers. And little by little, we became part of each other's lives. About 4 months after Kansas City, Clara flew down to Austin for a long weekend. Layla and Sophie were excited to meet her. Ryan was more reserved, but I could tell he was curious. And Clara? She fit in like she'd always been there. She helped Layla cook dinner. She joked with Sophie about boys, and she even managed to get Ryan to smile, which, for a teenage boy, is no small feat after dinner. As we sat outside on the porch, she squeezed my hand. This feels nice, she whispered. I nodded. Yeah, it really does. Over the next year, we built something real. We visited each other often, took vacations together, and slowly blended our lives. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days, days where grief crept in, days where doubts surfaced. But we faced them together. And one evening, as we sat in my backyard, watching the Texas sunset, Clara turned to me and said the words that changed everything. Michael, I think I'm ready. I want to be with you. For real. And just like that, my future was no longer a question mark. For the first time in a long, I knew where I was going. And I wasn't going alone. 1 year later, Clara moved to Austin. We bought a house together, blending our families into one. And on a warm June evening, surrounded by our children and closest friends, we said I do. It wasn't the love story I expected. It wasn't perfect or fairy tale-like. But it was real. And after everything we had been through, that was more than enough.